And that's the cultivation of freedom there.
Yeah.
Freedom of the mind.
Yes.
That's how you cultivate it. Because when we use an authoritarian voice over our children, it's almost as if I come across people who feel like you have healthy relationships because kids have been trained in a certain way to be that way. Mm-hmm. And what I find in my own life and with my husband is that there's a lot of work that we have to do to undo that. To undo some of the ideas. It's like, wait, do I feel this way? Or is this somebody else's? Or, as each thing comes up with each other, my husband and I, and with our children and in the world, we kind of have to go, okay, I need a minute to be clear about what's mine and what's not. And what I'm hoping to instill in my children, I'm working towards instilling in my children, is their ability to be clear about who they are.
Yes.
In each moment. And that always changes.
Exactly.
And that's a relationship that they have to continuously cultivate so that they can always be clear about who they are in any moment and how to be in the world.
Absolutely. So, that's that confident autonomy.
Fare of the Free Child is a weekly podcast that centers
diverse narratives, insightful commentary,
learning with our children and deschooling ourselves, owning our multiple identities and treating children with dignity,
creating community and sharing conversation from often silenced spaces,
breathing life into liberation practices proactively and on purpose.
It's about parenting. It's about self-directed education, loving. It's about learning, liberatory practices,
defining love for ourselves and giving our love to as much of the world as it can possibly contain.
Let's find each other. Let's support each other. All of these stories are important and should be shared.
Peace. First of all, I got to thank y'all for your emails about Marley's episode last week. She read your messages and she really appreciated the feedback. So did I. As y'all might know from Rockin' With Me, Marley is a voice actor and she really appreciates any opportunity to practice speaking publicly. So thank you for being part of her journey through your listenership and even more so through your feedback. In the coming weeks, Marley and I will be co-hosting an episode on supporting strong-willed children and navigating strong-willed parents. Marley and I have similar personalities and we really want to get honest about how we work through those sticky moments together. It should be interesting. When I approached her with the idea, she was like, yes, let's do it. So I don't know what she's going to say. I don't know what I'm going to say, but I know you should be listening. So stay tuned for that in the coming weeks. Got some other news for you too. The Life School Atlanta has launched an unschooler-friendly program. Shout out to Michaela Streeter, who is the principal and lead teacher of the Life School Atlanta. She asked me to share this with you guys, and I'm happy to do that. Michaela, by the way, was on episode 3 of the podcast back in August of last year. I'm going to put the link to that episode in the show notes page for today as well. She was on when the school was brand new, and so it's great to stay in touch with another woman of color who is committed to nurturing self-directed education in various forms. What I love about the Life School's model is that I think it offers a great segue because I wouldn't say that it is fully self-directed in terms of something like an agile learning center or maybe even a free school or a democratic school, but it is absolutely focused on ways to do more project-based learning and certainly a more liberatory approach to education for young people. So shout out to Michaela and her team for making that happen. The school, which again is the Life School Atlanta, has started offering a virtual unschooling program for teens anywhere in the world so that families who want more guidance and maybe even accountability can have a coach to help map out meaningful projects and support their teens' progress through weekly virtual meetings. So the link to the website where you can get all of those details will be on today's show notes page, which is akilasrichards.com/39, episode 39. And it's going to describe more about what they're offering and also tell you about some of the work that they've done with families so far. They're also doing an abbreviated summer version for those who want to try it out, or for those families who their children are in school throughout the year, but are immersed in unschooling throughout the summer, which I find really interesting. So if any of that appeals to you and you decide to check that out, whether you participate or not, I'd love to know your feedback on that. Also, if you're listening on March 31st, the day this episode first goes live, then tomorrow, June 1st, you need to come join me, come hang with me over at the Alliance for Self-Directed Education. I'm doing an AMA, which is an Ask Me Anything. And the way you participate in that is by simply becoming a member of the Alliance and logging into the forum. It's a wonderful space over there. As you may know, I am on the organizing team, a board member of the Alliance for Self-Directed Education, and I'm really, really excited about being part of a group of people who want to normalize this thing, who want to make this thing more accessible, and who really want to share the diverse voices and experiences in self-directed education. So come through. I'm going to be online between 12 and 9 p.m. Eastern, answering your questions inside the forum. So head over to self-directed.org. It's actually self-directed.org and become a member. And of course, that's going to be on the show notes page as well, that direct link. Today's conversation is being led by Genesis Ripley. She is a Los Angeles-based mama and natural learning advocate. And together we're talking about mask-free relationships. I love even saying that, mask-free relationships. We're talking about essentially the idea of presenting versus being present when it comes to parenting and leaving room for our children to do that as well. So we're talking about how freedom feels like an invalid option for so many parents because we're raised to believe that control and coercion, those are the ways that we help children to stay safe and free in the world. And we're also talking about why we need to allow ourselves to shift away from that paradigm over into something that's going to give children more room to practice confident autonomy, to practice feeling like they own themselves and that they can trust themselves to be their own leaders and to choose their own leaders, and not just to focus on how to fit in, but how to stand up and how to not feel threatened when other people practice that ownership of self too. So Genesis and I are talking about things like strong-willed children and the mindset around supporting them. We talk about feeling alone in the journey to raise free people, and Genesis has been really fortunate to have community and also really diligent about creating community. So we're going to talk about her community as well, which is the Alchemy Station. It's really, really wonderful, and I'm very much looking forward to your feedback on that conversation. We talk about things like how some children perform for their parents, right? Y'all remember that in school, like you perform for your teachers, you perform for your parents, and just talking about some ways to shift from that space because we're not looking to groom our children to be performers where they're performing from 9 to 5 throughout the day and can't wait till Friday to be themselves. We want to step away from that. So we're going in on that. And I love in particular that Genesis has this sort of gentle, soft, smart way of communicating that I think harmonizes really well with my sort of like, hell nah way of communicating. Is kind of a little bit soft, a little bit edge. It's nice. I want to know what you think about that. So again, the show notes page for today is akilasrichards.com/39. And let's get into it. Genesis, out in LA, tell us a little bit about yourself and your unschoolism in the mix.
Thank you for having me. I think it's really special and beautiful and necessary what you're doing, and I'm grateful to be included in it. I live in LA. I have been unschooling kids for the entire time, so they've never been in school.
Yeah, and your children are 9 and 6, right? Your son is 9.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, my son is 9. My daughter is 6. Yeah. And I didn't have a good experience in school. I went from school to school to school, and it never felt right to me for a myriad of reasons. And I remember acutely having that experience. And so when I had my own children, I already knew that we were going to at least do something alternative because private school, public school, none of it really worked for me. So I had a real issue with the lack of freedom and respect for my personal interests and how I felt constantly inundated with someone else's agenda. And I felt it really important that my kids find their own way in the world with my support. So they never went to school. And I kind of knew I was going to do something different, but I did have a lot of support because my sister homeschooled her 4, and her 3 oldest are out of the house now. And I have my cousin who unschooled her 3.
And that's what we were talking about a little bit at the beginning, that one of the reasons I'm so happy you're on, one of the many reasons I'm so happy you're on Genesis, is because that is so outside of the norm for most people that I know, myself included. We knew no one, certainly not anybody in real life, who unschooled. And your cousin, it's Jocelyn, right?
Right.
Yes.
And
yes.
ironically, that's my sister's name as well.
And
my sister was named after her.
And I don't even remember if I told you this, but my grandfather, with whom I was super, super close, that's his name as well, Jocelyn.
Wow.
Yes.
It's a unique name for a man. I'd like to hear that story one day.
Yeah, it's actually spelled differently, Joaclyn. Jocelyn Emmanuel. Yeah, and he's such a big part of, like, as a little girl, he was one of the people who nurtured my sense of freedom and just being who and how I was. I was like, I ran around a lot and I was loud and I asked a lot of questions, and he was very supportive and like protective of that way. So I'm finding it really interesting that the Jocelyns are coming through.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Wow,
yeah,
that's beautiful.
And before we go any further, Genesis, tell us a little bit about your background as well. Like, what is Genesis?
Wow. I ask myself that every day. I'm kind of, I'm a person who likes to live. I love to live, and I just love to experience things and connect with people. And I don't have any particular agendas in my life. I never really have. My life is just to explore this gift of being alive and breathing every day, however that manifests in each moment and wherever that takes me. I trust it. Before I had kids, I did massage therapy. So I studied in a couple places in Thailand. I focused on Thai massage, and that kind of allowed me a lot of the freedom that I wanted and needed. And I started late with my children. So I explored quite a bit before I had any. And mostly I just liked traveling, and I just liked observing the world and writing. That was my journey. And then my husband and I decided we wanted one. Actually, he decided before I did. And he had decided a long time ago, and he was pressing it. I was really excited, enjoying my freedom, but he was like, "Come on, baby." So I was like, "No, not yet." And then finally I said, "Okay." So we had Sage, and he changed my life. I just looked at him, and I wanted everything for him that I did get that felt nourishing, and everything for him that I didn't get.
Yes. And Genesis is definitely on that raising free people train with us. I've had the pleasure of having some conversations with her inside the Slack group and some email communication, a chat. I know, and we also both have a Sage. We both have a Jocelyn and a Sage. That's so interesting. And I love that, one of the things we said is that how they can change your life. Obviously, logistically, children change your life, but also very much like spiritually, because your perspective, particularly people like us who have very much been always connected to our need for freedom and the idea that we didn't want to be tethered to anyone else's anything until and unless we were good and ready. We share that as well. And we didn't talk about that, but that was constantly a thing for me in school. Outside of the issues with race, there was definitely the issue with just like how I am, not particularly my blackness, but just my Aquila-ness, and the idea that someone else got to decide how I spent my time. That never sat well with me, like from ever since. And then you have a child or children who also show up with their very own ways and can articulate it and feel protective of their space and that sort of thing. And for people like us, it could be really jarring, like knowing what you needed and why it's important that they're how they are, but then also kind of hitting your head against that wall of like, okay, but what does this mean? Like, how do I facilitate this? We talked
right.
a bit
how
about
do you
that.
navigate each moment, and how are you clear about what the boundaries are
Yes.
between what their needs are and respect for everyone else's needs in the household and in the community, you know, like how do you, and that's a constant discussion and process that this kind of life you have to have over time.
Yeah.
It's a constant, and it never ends because there's always something new. And it's a beautiful thing because it keeps me growing and stretching in so many ways that I can never expect. So it's always pulling on those neurons that I don't use as much because it's always, I never know what's coming out of my kids sometimes, especially my daughter. I never know. So,
and that's Sadaya, right? Am I pronouncing her name correctly?
Yeah, Sadaya.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. I'm so grateful for it because in so many ways, it's not an easy journey. It's by no means easy, but it's the biggest gift that I've ever had because it grows me in a way that I never imagined, and I get to reciprocate that for my children. So it's like this continuous circle of us giving to each other in a way that feels so beautiful and organic, rather than contrived.
Exactly. It's so multi-layered as well, because one of the things that I love about the space that you're in, Genesis, is that you have community. One, from the very beginning, as you said, because you were able to look at Jocelyn as an example, at least to see like what it looks like for someone else, because it's very unique for each family and also each iteration, because with each child, it's different as well. So it's constantly shifting. Also, you have a community locally where you have, I think, 3 other good friends who are also in that sort of like what you and I call that decolonization, deschooling journey, particularly among people of color. That's just one of those things that's to me like magical, because so many people who find me through the podcast are like, oh, you do exist. You know, like the M&M commercial when they saw Santa or whatever it was. It's like, yeah, we do exist, but you actually have that in person. I think that's
to be
beautiful.
fair, I actually did feel like that when I found you. I was like, I felt like, oh my gosh, there's others, because even though I have a few other in my circle, it's just us. And the rest of it feels like a void, or felt like a void.
I see.
You know, where's everyone else?
I see. Yes.
Yeah.
So still way too small.
Right. And then what's interesting about our journey is that, you know, each of us, I started off knowing I was going to do life learning. And I like that idea of that term of life learning, because really it's inclusive of everyone in the family. It's my children are the focal point for me, yet all of us matter and all of our needs matter. And this journey is still continuing. I'm still growing. My husband's still growing. Mm-hmm. So really it's about all of us. But, you know, with my community, and one of us just moved away, so I'm really sad about that. But yeah, she's in New York now. Interview her too, because she's amazing.
Good. Send the information.
I'll connect you guys.
Yes.
But, you know, they didn't start this way. You know, it was kind of like we all were homeschooling and we knew each other. And we started talking more and more on the phone, and we had these dialogues with ourselves, and just, it kind of grew our perspective. Our kids started getting close, so they started playing. So it was actually really a beautiful synergy that kind of grew out of everything, because we all the mom sat down and we'd be like, what about this? Well, this is what's happening with my kid right now. What do you think about this? And we'd go back and forth about our philosophies and about how that fits in with reality and how we can connect those things and what it looks like as we continue on. So we didn't all start that way. It just kind of grew into all of us becoming these life learners in life. You know, if you want to put a label on it, it kind of just grew into that thing where we all kind of share a very similar perspective. And there's things we agree on and we don't agree on, but what we seem to all have in common is really respecting our children's process is a deep, deep value that we all hold. Respecting them and honoring them, and that our relationship to each other is sacred. My relationship with my child is a sacred relationship. There's no dollar sign on my child in terms of what they're worth. There's no idea in my mind about how they should behave. We all kind of seek that way of, okay, that's not working for me. Can we figure this out together?
Yes.
And that's always how right. Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, I love that. I really, really value that. As you know, it's so important that we have these sort of conversations out loud because, again, particularly for people of color, it can feel like such a challenge to embrace what you're saying, which is also what I believe, that my work is to shed all of the ideas, because I did absolutely come with ideas of who and how my children should probably be and should probably behave. A lot of that had to do with my background as well, just, coming from a very traditional Caribbean background. Even though my mother is not a very traditional Caribbean woman, the background is. And so there was a lot of expectation of, particularly being immigrants. It's like, okay, now you came to the country. These are the expectations. This is the good pressure. And if you do this, then all of these things will not have been for naught. And, all of these things that came with it. And even though my girls were born here, I still carried over a lot of those things and really am continually deschooling myself. And Chris, my partner, is also Jamaican. We have a very similar mindset with this thing. So we recognize places where we're not partnering with the girls, and we realize that the work is ours to do, not theirs, and that it's a relationship.
Absolutely.
And I also love that together, you and I get to be a part of creating that safe space, Genesis, for other people who are considering the same thing too, but may not even be able to name it, because our people don't have a lot of language and practice with this way, because there's so much other pressure to fit our children into something so that they can be safe and so that they cannot be poor and so they can not, all of these other things that get in the way of just like, yo, can we just have a motherfucking relationship? So yeah.
Yeah, it is about just, my husband's Jamaican too, right?
Yes, you did mention.
Yes. So he does come from a very strict traditional background, and his mom was really strict. She's an amazing woman. I love her dearly. Yeah. That's how she raised her son, though. She wanted him to be safe,
Yes.
So, he and I, it's been an interesting journey, because I would say that most of this has been me kind of going, hey, baby, let's not send the kids to school. Hey, baby, let's travel instead of,
Yeah.
instead of doing, and he's like, oh my gosh, this girl. But at the same time, that's kind of been our relationship all along. And he's kind of been my anchor, my grounding, and my strong support. Mm-hmm. And he in turn has opened his heart to exploring different ideas, and he appreciates, in every moment. Sometimes he'll just go, thank you for doing this for our kids. I mean, he works a lot, and we're in the process of manifesting new ways of being together, because he's not home as much as we'd like him to be at all.
I hear that. We were there for some time. Yes, I understand that.
Yes, we are intentionally working on changing that. But, he's just very grateful, and he sees, because this is scary, right? I mean, what we're doing, it's not, it's definitely, there's a lot of faith in ourselves that's a part of it. And there's a lot of faith in children and a lot of faith that they're going to be okay. But he sees when he comes home and he's talking with his kids, he's like, wow. He's just wowed at their perspective, and also at their position of feeling right to have that perspective. Mm-hmm. Like, they step into what they're saying and they're like, this is how it is for me.
Yes.
And sometimes that bumps up against our edges, and we're like, let me have
I know it. I know. But that's exactly what we're good with the edge too, because one, it's familiar as hell, right? Because as you brought up just like your background in school and the feelings that you had. So there's a sense almost of, at least for me, familiarity, and also the reality that that's exactly what they're going to need. And it's also the type of skill set and mindset and way that a lot of adults are pushing to be able to get to the point where we can confidently own ourselves.
Because the reality is, I'm really clear about what I want for my children in terms of their autonomy. I want them to not succumb to authority. I want them to think for themselves and make good decisions about their lives and about how they want to be in the community. And I want it to come from them. That doesn't mean I don't want them to be willing and open to hearing wisdom from others, but just to be really clear and filter everything from their sense of self. And in order to get to that, they have to practice it. And it will be on the parents.
Absolutely.
We're the closest ones to them. We're the safest place. And so they're going to exercise their will on us. And I think that's where things get tricky for a lot of people, is that idea of, hey, you need to mind, or you need to be respectful, or you need to, I give my kids a lot of space to express what they're talking about. I hear what they're saying, and then I share how maybe their vehicle for expression made me feel. No anger, no, this is just what that brought for me. That makes me feel like you're not honoring my perspective, or however I need to frame it in this particular instance.
And these are life skills.
They have, yes, and they have to practice it. And so that's where it's really, I think that's where the trigger kind of rises for a lot of people is, hey, I didn't get that.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
Nobody did that for me.
Yeah.
And it's really difficult to kind of hold that space over and over and over. And then as they get older, they become more articulate with their perspectives. And so it becomes even more powerful. And what I will say about my children is they both have a very strong sense of self. They're so clear and so gentle at the same time about how they express to me. And with my son, it's really easy because that's his nature. He's my gentle giant. But with my daughter, she has a whole lot more spice to her. Yeah. And I watch her try to, as she grows, because she's only 6, I watch her try to kind of, okay, the way I said that was kind of harsh. I don't even have to tell her sometimes.
Yes, I know exactly what you're talking about.
I just give a little space after she says something, she has a moment to actually reflect.
Yep.
And she'll come back to me and go, wow, that was really hard, Mom, sorry. Or I shouldn't have said it like that. I wish I would have said it this way.
Yeah.
And I would just say, thank you for recognizing that.
Absolutely.
But a lot of times what happens is we jump down their throat instantly.
And then they're human and we're human. Yes. Then it becomes about the battle in the moment and not about the thing that actually happened. I hear you. There's a very similar thing with Marley, who is now 13. And she is, there was never a point where she didn't own herself. As I say all the time, motherhood raised me. Okay. Mar was 5 and 6 writing me letters about her issues with my ruliness and why that was problematic for her and why she didn't feel free. Well, I'm going to ask her one day if she will read one of the letters, because we still have them, where she talks about that. She's like, yo, that doesn't feel like freedom to me. This is before we were even unschooling. She was a regular ass pre-K. Okay. So talking to me about her freedom and how I was like encroaching on that. And then other times where she would say something, and just as you said, that would happen with Sadaya, she would come back and be like, Mommy, yeah, I feel like that was our word is gangster. I feel like that was kind of gangster. Okay. But what I meant was, this and this and that. And I'm like, okay, and then there are other times where I have to go back. This still happens where I'm like, okay, Mar, I was bugging. I'm sorry. This is how that made me feel, because that's one of the things that Chris and I love about the space too, is that just as they get to practice, because they are practicing these skills in the safety of our home, it also means that there's a responsibility on our part to be hella real about it. So we don't like, okay, and act like something doesn't hurt. Like if you say something offensive, I don't care whose child or whose mama you are, I'm going to say something because that's an Aquila thing. So it doesn't matter who I'm talking to. I'm myself wherever and however I am, right? So then they know, oh yeah, Mom doesn't like this. So this is going to be my approach here. And to me, or Daddy doesn't like when we say this, so this is going to be my approach here. That's a life skill, because in any environment, as an entrepreneur, or if you work for someone, or just in a collective with your peoples, you are going to need to understand how other people receive things, because communication is a two-way street. So they get to practice these things. They get to see, oh, she gets angry. Whether my anger is rational or not, they now know that, oh, this is what my body language is dictating it might happen next, or, and how they have a role in how things might flow by how they choose to communicate. So I think,
absolutely.
Yeah. And in schools, in a traditional environment, that can't happen because there's this focus on diplomacy and indoctrination and all and just this idea of what discipline actually is, that has nothing to do with people skills and life skills and processing and autonomy and the things we actually use as adults.
Right. And then even when they're on the in recess and they have a couple minutes with each other, there's no support.
Right.
So they're running around like Lord of the Flies, and there's no help. I mean, when you have, like, my daughter needs support when she's having a hard time with something. Yeah. She's really fiery, and sometimes she just says what she has to say, how she wants to say it. And she'll say it to someone else, and I'll look at that person's face and I'll say, I'm not thinking that felt so good to her.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if you're thinking that's nourishing your friendship, or if you even want a friendship with this person, or how you think, and everyone has their own way. You develop your own way of getting that across and of giving them things to think about.
Yeah.
Depending on who you are and who your child is.
Yes.
So there isn't a script for this.
Exactly.
It's simply a holding respect as a value, and trusting your child, trusting that they are innately capable.
Yeah. And that's something that we don't have a lot of practice with at all. I love that you mentioned Lord of the Flies, because that's the thing that, especially when I get on one-on-one calls with folks, around, just this space of really nurturing a partnership, like shifting away from what we're used to and over into a partnership-based relationship with children. That's hard, for a lot of people, and particularly for our people, because of that idea of, like, if I don't come down on them hard, if I'm not disciplining them, and whether we're talking about physically or not, but essentially if I'm not using this oppressive approach, then it is going to be Lord of the Flies. They're going to slap me in the face and call me a bitch in the supermarket. Like this idea, that one picture that we talk about over and over again, which I think is really tragic. Honestly, I think it's tragic that we equate freedom with chaos. Right? Like, we've grown acclimated to associate freedom and giving someone the human right to be themselves and to explore themselves and to be in partnership and to feel safe and valued and respected. We equate that with, they're not going to be able to handle that. It's going to be chaotic.
Like some sort of anarchy, right?
Exactly. And it isn't one or the other at all. And there are free people who choose anarchy in a moment. Like, we all go there. These are tools in our kit. And the work is to teach and lead by example, and to be in environments where we can learn, all of us as adults and children, how to practice confident autonomy, because it is a skill that needs to be practiced.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. I really believe that we don't really understand what it is to be free, because none of us have ever had that, and because of oppression. And the idea that we have to oppress our children in order for them to grow up and be good and strong thinking people in the world really doesn't belong to us.
Yes.
I believe. Absolutely, a partnership actually cultivates, in my mind, even more of a genuine relationship with a child to the world and how they want to be in it. Because when you get angry at a child, or when you are, I should use the word, authoritative over a child, it's really difficult for them to come from a place of genuine understanding, because they're busy needing to defend themselves, or they're frustrated, or there's no, there's a science to that.
Exactly.
When a child is feeling anxiety or upset or frustration, they can't think.
When a human, Genesis,
anyone.
Yeah, exactly. That's the thing. We see them as these other, thank you, exactly. Also because that's the thing. We're viewing them as these, like, weird things. That's like, dude, they're people. They are people. They're newer people, but they're people. So the same way that if you come at me out of the side of your mouth, I'm going to have this human response. It isn't any different for them because they were in your belly or because you knew them as a baby. That's hard for us to understand. Yeah.
And then also I don't even really like the word modeling, because modeling sounds like we're doing something that's not authentic. But when we treat them with respect, they learn what it feels like. They understand what that is and how that feels to them. So when you're talking to kids, for instance, who go to school or who are parented under authoritative paradigm, they don't know what it looks and feels like to be respected. And so you have a different response. And so then you're looking at your kid like, yeah, that's great for you, but this wouldn't work for me because I have this kid.
Mm-hmm.
But really, to me, respect and partnership would work for any child.
Right. For any human, for any healthy relationship.
Right.
Once
Exactly.
again. Yeah.
Exactly. You know, it actually, in my mind, means that, you know, I get to watch my daughter grow authentic relationship to treating people with respect,
yes,
to being mindful about her choices. It's authentic. It's not my voice in her head
right.
that's telling her what to do. I suggest, and I'm not, there are times when I'm like, baby girl, if you continue to do that, we're going to have to go, because that's not respecting the space of everyone else.
Absolutely.
And I don't want to have to leave. So can we figure out, do you just need some space for a while? Or can we figure out a plan that will make it so you can feel more comfortable here? I can see you're not comfortable.
Thank you very much for giving that example, because, and I forget about doing that too, being specific in that way, because we don't have the practice Genesis. And because we think it's either like, I'm either going to have to do it the way that it's been done to me, or Lord of the Flies. That's it. That's the spectrum. Because we don't know it, it's really important that we give these sort of examples. And I'm glad that you gave that specific one. That's something that we did a lot too with our daughters, particularly Marley. Again, just coming, especially because I have the benefit of seeing the difference of Marley at 5, 6, 7, 8 and Marley now at 13. She has grown to become so much more of a compassionate person than she was before. And we've talked about this too. And I know she's comfortable with it. You know, you're really making me think I should probably do an episode with Marley. because we had a lot of these challenges early on where she would be like, for example, if she was using the computer and her sister wanted to use it, or she was somewhere where somebody else wanted to use it, you know, she'd be like, well, that's up to them. You know, they need to ask the same way I ask. Then they have a mouth, they can ask too. And I would be like, you know, wanting her to think about the other person's feelings, but also still honoring where she is and that sort of thing. And to see the shift over time, again, just as you said, it's not my voice in her head. And also she's not performing for me, because a lot of kids, we know this, perform for their parents.
Right.
She's not doing that just because we were willing to meet her where she was, be with her where she was, and say, okay, here's how that makes me feel. Or to encourage the other child, or to be the voice for the other child in some instances, to say, here's why that's not okay. And then to see her be like, oh, is that how it is for you? Okay.
Right.
You know, because it never dawned on her. It wasn't her being mean. It wasn't, you know, all of the other things. I said, don't be bad, you know, be kind, all of these things. It was none of that. It's just that because she didn't operate from that space in her mind, if she wanted something, she was going to go get it. In her mind, then it never even dawned on her that someone else might feel nervous about asking for what they want, you know, or that these sort of things. So when you create that safe space that you would with any other human, just like you would with your man or your woman or whoever, when you're like, oh, they didn't see it that way. So because I love them and because I'm looking to grow this relationship, I'm going to communicate my need instead of cursing them out or trying to hit them or talking to my friends, but not talking to them. When we can take that approach, when we look at them, not even just as children to be trusted and respected, but as people. And I compare a lot the relationship to the relationship that I have with Chris, with my husband, to say I would never take the approach of thinking that I would like hit him upside the head, or that I would just not talk about it and expect him to understand without communicating, and sometimes communicating repeatedly. When we take that approach, then we give them the space to grow so that they're not just like performing for us, or it's not us inside their head. It's them being like, oh, I see now that since everybody isn't me, that here's how I need to operate in a space that's actually valuing other people and not just prioritizing my needs.
It's true. And you know, that's the cultivation of freedom there. Freedom of the mind.
Yes.
That's how you cultivate it. Because when we use an authoritarian voice over our children, it's almost as if I come across people who feel like you have healthy relationships because kids have been trained in a certain way to be that way. Mm-hmm. And what I find in my own life and with my husband is that there's a lot of work that we have to do to undo that, to undo some of the ideas. It's like, wait, do I feel this way? Or is this somebody else's? Or, as each thing comes up with each other, my husband and I, and with our children and in the world, we kind of have to go, okay, I need a minute to be clear about what's mine and what's not. And what I'm hoping to instill in my children, I'm working towards instilling in my children, is their ability to be clear about who they are.
Yes.
In each moment. And that always changes.
Exactly.
And that's a relationship that they have to continuously cultivate so that they can always be clear about who they are in any moment and how to be in the world.
Absolutely. So, that's that confident autonomy because it changes, right? There's the pivoting that's important because we shift and also our environments shift, our needs shift, all of these things. But in that, there's that grounding.
Exactly.
Yes. When you have that knowledge of self, when that base is clear, then you can shift and be okay with the shifting. And that's one of the things I say all the time, that even with I didn't grow up in an unschooling environment at all, but one of the benefits of how I grew up is that I was a part of a large community who just loved on this one little girl. I was the only child in the community for some time. Yeah.
Right.
And then, when my brother came along and my cousins and all of that, now there's like a gazillion of us. I have like 11 million cousins and 3 brothers and a sister. But I was loved on in a way that fortunately, I think it just happened at the right time. Like by the time I got to the US and came to school and all of that, it was too late. I was already focused on freedom and confident autonomy. And that just grew as I got older. And now I'm shedding a lot of not it shit, but the foundation was there because I was allowed to be my very weird self by a lot of people. And that's all I want from Marley and Sage, that they can feel like they are allowed to be and to become and to pivot. And as long as, and they know, because we say this all the time, as long as we feel like compassion is in the midst of things, because I can't deal with the idea of not considering other people. And maybe I need to do some work around that, but I am where I am. But outside of that, I just leave a lot of space for, and I have to be honest, when I feel like they're being selfish in a way that I feel is destructive, I call it out, probably not in the healthiest of ways. And then we talk about it because we have that sort of relationship.
Right. Because we are human too.
Yes.
And I also have to own my stuff when it comes up. You know what? That was my bad.
Yeah, exactly. I
could have presented that differently. Sorry about that. And they're very forgiving of me because I'm very forgiving.
Which teaches me too. It teaches me to be forgiving of them because they are so forgiving. And I say all the time, I was Akila first, and I am always Akila first, and then your mom. And sometimes people say, oh my God. But that's one of the ways that I healed my relationship with my mother, with whom I'm now very close. But for the longest time, I feel like, things weren't perfect. They never are. But I held this idea of because she's my mother, ellipses, she should have been this way or she should have thought this way. And it's like, dude, she was Valerie for 20 years before me and she's still Valerie now at 60. She just turned 60. And so for me, I try to keep that in, at the forefront to say, hey, I'm Akila and then I'm your mom. So please keep it. And I want you to know.
And quite honestly, that makes us better mothers.
I think so too, Genesis. Because you get to know the real me, just like I'm getting to know the real you. I don't present a version of myself, the same modeling thing that you mentioned. I don't do that. I'm myself. And I want to be my best self for me and also for them because they inspire me. They motivate me and they help to raise me. I call them my life guides, but also because I want them to feel free to be themselves too, like whoever that is in that moment. Yes. I love hearing you say that for Sadaya and Sage, that is also the space you create, an honoring of who they actually are.
I think what part of this journey is really kind of redefining what the parent-child relationship is, because I find that, there's a lot of healing that had to happen with me and my parents too. And right now we have a wonderful relationship. It was really interesting. Side note that initially my mom always respects my choices, but she quietly wonders how it's going to go.
Yeah.
And so my dad is a little more vocal, and sometimes, what on earth are you doing? But now they really respect what I'm doing. And it took time. They didn't always.
Yeah.
At first they were really nervous. And this is going back to my cousin, they know that my cousin did something very similarly to what I'm doing. And our households are different. My cousin, this is still very individual.
Yes.
And based on what each family looks like. But, they knew that she did it and they really respect and love her. So there was a lot more willingness to kind of observe what I was doing.
Got it.
But now they really look at it and they celebrate it. They think that their grandkids are the cat's meow. And they talk about them from the high. My son can do no wrong.
Yep.
And
very familiar. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So they just adore the people that they're becoming.
Yes.
And, it's been a real, good journey in terms of my healing from things that happened in our household. I also, at the same time, recognize that it's not easy to be a parent. So as the things come up between me and my children, and as we grow as a family, I'm like, wow. And I'll even bring it up to them, like, remember when this happened, you guys? To my parents. I get it now. I get why this was
Oh
hard.
my gosh. Yep. My mom is like, karma. She says it all the time, karma, and laughs.
Yes,
I'm like, oh my God, yes. She's like,
Yeah.
Yes. I love that
But
too. And as you said, it makes you present on both sides of the spectrum, right? So for your children, for yourself, so multiple sides, for yourself, in your partnership with your husband, and then also in that relationship with your own parents.
And the reason why I continue to make this decision to do this, because it's not just one big decision. It's a continuous choice to do this life and live this way, is because all my relationships are better. Everything is evolving in a way that feels intentional for me and is what I want. And it doesn't mean that everything is pictured exactly what my vision of things should be, but it's nourishing.
Yes.
And it feels like the direction that I want to continue to go, which is why I continue to make this choice. And when things are scary, I'll admit that knowing that my cousin has gotten through these things. And then beyond my cousin, because, I know a lot of people who unschool, knowing that they have teenagers that are really beautiful human beings.
Yes.
I know that this is sometimes we're at that hump. Because my kid is, 10. Well, he's almost 10.
Yeah.
And we're getting to that place now where he's like, he's not as laid back as he used to be.
Yes, ma'am.
And, I watch him, and sometimes he says things. I've gotten better because it is a practice that I've cultivated of being mindful about when I get triggered.
Yeah.
And taking a moment before I speak if I'm triggered. Just saying, you know what? I'm going to need a minute with that to sit and think about it. And they're used to that. That's my way. That's what works for me.
And that's the beauty of the groove too, right? Like you do get used to, because it is a partnership and not these presentations of each other, and not this, authoritarian model that doesn't actually factor everybody in. Because of that, they do get used to who and how you are, the same way you're learning to get used to who and how they are. So all of that, they know, like they get it. And the older they get, the more they get it. And sometimes they'll even be able to help you to manage the trigger. That happens to me all the time. The girls are 11 and 13. Yes. And they'll say it, and Sage is, she's very physical, always been a very tactile person. And she'll do that, and she'll like touch my shoulder or touch my head or touch my cheek. And I know what she means. I see that she sees that I'm like deciding, get buck or get present, get buck, get present, like in that moment. And she's so good. And she always has been about like just checking me on that in the sort of way, the same way her dad does. Funny. They have a very similar energy. The same way Chris does, that just brings me back to a space the space I prefer to be in. It's like their magic to me specifically. And I say funny, like, it's like they manage me in a way that I have no problem with because they get it. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And, it's because we're our own constitution, but
Yes.
also the family unit is a constitution. We're all kind of a living organism
Yes.
together, individuals. And so you're right. We grow into each other in terms of really understanding how we function.
Yes.
And even my 6-year-old can sometimes, she'll see if I'm having a hard time with something. And if she's mad at me, sometimes she'll just go and, she likes to give gifts. So she'll go get a rock.
Yeah.
And she'll wrap it up in paper and put a bow on it. And then, even if we're upset at each other,
Yeah.
and then she'll run into the room, throw it at me, and run out of the room.
Yes, and that's her love language, and you get to be part. That is just beautiful. Yes, and because she's free to express herself, then you get to learn her language, and then you all can actually communicate instead of barking at each other. And then, again, this idea of
Absolutely.
Children surviving their parents and their childhood and then growing into themselves. I don't want that for mine. And none of us have to do that. And I love that you said we are this living, breathing constitution, both individually and collectively. And it's, and we get to nurture each other. And Genesis, speaking of collective, I also want to make sure that we address the ways that even if these are just the ideas that you have right now, I know from having spoken to you before that just like me, we're not trying to keep this bottled up in our households. We love that we have supportive partners and that our babies are like real cool and we're understanding each other, la-di-da. But also we want to expand that. We know that this is something that more people should have access to. So I want to make sure we have time to address your ideas and maybe even things that you are doing to nurture that space for other people.
Absolutely. I have a coalition of families, and we call ourselves Alchemy Station. And it's the 4 mamas that we've all kind of grown together, these 4 families that have decided together that, it's so hard to understand how beautifully freeing and liberatory this life is, unless you take the journey one step at a time. Start where you are and you take it one step at a time.
Yeah.
And so we're creating sort of that place where people can come. It's going to be a website. It's not up yet, where people can come, and all of the stuff that we've gathered that have helped us take those little steps forward. We're going to kind of put that in all the 10 years that I've had, and my friend Jackie, the 13 years that she's had of us growing our knowledge around this and our experience around this and our wisdom around this. And we're kind of going to all put it in a very organized place so that as people are ready, they can come and explore from where they're at.
Yes. So life learning at any stage in the journey is what I hear you saying. Because when you say this, that's what we're talking about, right? Life learning at any stage in the journey. Got it.
Right. Right. Because we all start at different places.
Yep.
And we all have different things that might impede our ability to connect.
Sure.
And so we want to try to kind of fill that space with as much as we can to support people in their own journey, because this is so personal. It's really, really personal, claiming our rights to liberty in this way.
Yes.
Just claiming it outside of what's happening in the world, just being really clear about no longer wanting to participate in the oppression. And so, we wanted to create that space where people can come and slowly explore and do it in a way that feels right for them. It's not up yet. And part of that is in my understanding of, I still have a 6-year-old who requires a lot of my energy. And so, because human beings still need to sleep.
Unfortunately, damn.
Right. It's overrated. I have to kind of balance my ability to do this work with where things are at in my family right now, because I'm aware there will be more space as they get older, and I'll be missing these moments when she's all up under me.
I know. But so what I hear you saying is, Genesis, and her coalition. They're out in LA, and then we might be having a New York branch, so I heard.
Yes, Raleigh, Navarro.
Nice. So what I hear is that there's a potential opportunity for help, because you don't have to do this alone. There are many other people who need this. And so if you feel like you're one of the people who this really resonates with you and you need it, I'm definitely going to have some contact info for Genesis, whether that just be Facebook, or I see you recently on Instagram or wherever, where you can reach out so that whenever she's ready and whenever they're ready and they have an idea of what support might look like, that you can be involved, because this is a big part of why Fear of the Free Child podcast exists. I don't just want to be like, ta-da, look at beautiful, shiny Genesis. Awesome. We'll stay in touch. No, like if you about this life, then you should be willing to support it. So I want to make sure that, whether it's the website or doing local meetups in the meantime, or whether it's just a Facebook group or, whatever it needs to be to, facilitate, whatever you can do from where you are, and also to have it grow organically, then I definitely want to be a part of that. I want to be party to that growth.
Thank you for that.
Yes.
Thank you for that. And thank you for making me a party to, doing what you're doing.
Oh,
because
you're welcome.
When I found you, I was so grateful because you are giving you're giving a voice to this. And, I know quite a few people who are unschooling, but I don't know a number of people of color that are unschooling. And that is so huge, because our needs are different. Yep. And they're different specifically as our children age up.
Yes.
And I didn't recognize how different they were until I was in those moments. And I'm like, okay, what do I have to go to right now? So I'm grateful for the work that you're doing, because it's the more the world can see that we're out there, the more that we can see that we're out there, the more we can support each other.
Exactly.
And that's what you're doing, is you're like that webbing that's bringing people together.
Oh, wonderful. I'm doing my job then, because that's exactly what I want to do. And I know for a lot of people, I'm like the gateway to life learning and unschooling, which I think is a wonderful thing, because, one of the main issues that I have with unschooling now is that it's still viewed as this privilege, as this luxury. And I don't think self-preservation is a luxury at all, or a privilege at all. But I get it. I get why people say that. But I want us to be able to, I don't want it to be that just those of us who have supportive partners and family are the only ones who can unschool. Unschooling is not a subset of homeschooling. It can happen anywhere, and it can happen in a large group. It doesn't even have to happen inside of the home only, because it's a mindset. It's an approach. So the more we talk about it out loud, the more of us can get together and create what the environments need to be to facilitate, like where we are in our journey. So single parents can unschool, and people with no money in the world can unschool. That's why this is important. Yeah. Access. It needs to be more accessible. And so this is why these conversations are so important. So thank you so much, Genesis, for making time out of your busy schedule to talk to us and to share your beautiful voice. I love your voice and your beautiful journey. Really, really encouraged by what you're setting out to do and what you're already doing. So we shall be in touch.
Oh, sounds beautiful. Thanks for having me, Akila.
You're very welcome, sis.
Tweet your feedback using the hashtag POC in SDE, as in people of color in self-directed education.
Thanks for listening to Fear of the Free Child podcast. Like the show? Then show your love or give your feedback at akilasrichards.com.